My gambling addict husband secretly lost our savings over 4 years while I was raising our 3 kids. I'm 37, he's 36, we've been married for 11 years, and I honestly don't know if our marriage will survive this. But let me start from the beginning because this story is long and complicated and I need to get it all out. When I met David, he was 25 and working as an assistant at a photography studio. I was 26, fresh out of business school, working at a small financial firm. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue and clicked immediately. He was funny, creative, passionate about his work. I was practical, organized, good with numbers. We balanced each other out perfectly. We dated for 3 years before getting married. During that time, I learned about his gambling problem. He told me up front, which I appreciated. He'd gotten into online poker in college and lost about $5,000 before his parents found out and made him stop. He said he'd learned his lesson, hadn't touched it since, and was being honest with me because he wanted to start our relationship with complete transparency. I believed him. I thought the fact that he told me voluntarily meant he had it under control. Looking back, that was naive. Addiction doesn't just go away because you want it to. We got married in the summer when I was 26. Small wedding, mostly family, nothing fancy. We were happy, really genuinely happy for those first few years. About 2 months after our wedding, David came to me crying. He'd relapsed. He'd been playing online poker again and lost $3,000. He was devastated, ashamed, apologetic. He swore it would never happen again. He deleted his accounts, gave me access to all our finances, promised complete transparency. I was upset, but I forgave him. People make mistakes. Addiction is hard. He was getting help, being honest, taking responsibility. That's what mattered, right? He didn't gamble again for years after that. Or at least I didn't know about it if he did. Our life moved forward. I got promoted at work. David started freelancing as a photography and built up a decent client base. We bought a small house in the suburbs, had our first baby when I was 29. Being parents was hard, but wonderful. David was an amazing father, patient, playful, involved. He did night feedings, changed diapers without complaining, sang silly songs to our daughter. I loved watching him with her. We had our second baby 2 years later, then our third last year. 3 kids under 8. It's chaos, but it's our chaos. Or it was until I discovered what David had been doing behind my back. Around 2020, I started noticing we were having money problems. Nothing dramatic at first, just little things. Credit card bills that seemed higher than they should be, having to dip into savings more often. David saying we needed to be more careful with spending. I made decent money at my job, about $60,000 a year. David made around $80,000 with his photography business. We should have been comfortable. Not rich, but comfortable. We didn't live extravagantly. Modest house, used cars, didn't take expensive vacations. Where was all the money going? I asked David about it a few times. He always had explanations. Business expenses for his photography equipment, the kids needing things, house repairs. It all sounded reasonable enough. I trusted him. I used to have access to our main checking account online. I check it periodically, make sure everything looked okay. But at some point, the password changed. I mentioned it to David and he said the bank must have reset it for security reasons. He'll get me the new password. He never did. I should have pushed harder on that, but I had a toddler and was pregnant with our third baby, and I was just so tired all the time. I let it slide. That's on me. I should have been more vigilant about our finances, but I trusted my husband. I never thought he'd lie to me about something this important. What I didn't know was that in 2020, David had opened a Robinhood account and started day trading. He told me he was putting a little money into stocks, treating it like a hobby. I thought he meant like $100 here and there, playing around with index funds. I didn't realize he meant day trading options in risky stocks with thousands of dollars. The thing about day trading is that it's basically gambling. You're betting on short-term price movements, trying to time the market, operating on emotion and adrenaline rather than sound investment principles. For someone with a gambling addiction, it's incredibly dangerous. It has all the same psychological hooks as poker or slot machines. The thrill of the win, the desperation to recover losses, the illusion that you can beat the system if you just try hard enough. David got sucked in completely. And because it was framed as investing rather than gambling, it was easier for him to justify. He wasn't playing poker, he was building our future. He was trying to make money for our family. He was being responsible. Except he was losing, badly, consistently. And instead of stopping, he kept doubling down, trying to make back what he'd lost. Classic gambling addiction behavior. I didn't know any of this was happening. I was working 40+ hours a week at a job I hated, coming home to take care of our kids, pregnant and exhausted. David seemed fine, stressed about work sometimes, but that seemed normal for a freelancer. He was still a great dad, still present with the kids. I had no idea our finances were imploding. Last winter, when I was 8 months pregnant with our third baby, David told me we needed to take out a home equity line of credit, a HELOC. He said it was to consolidate our credit card debt, which had gotten higher than he'd like. He made it sound routine, responsible even. We'd pay off the high-interest credit cards and just have one lower-interest payment on the house. I was hugely pregnant, uncomfortable, worried about the upcoming birth and having a newborn again. I didn't have the energy to dig into the details. I signed the papers and trusted that David knew what he was doing. What I didn't realize was how much credit card debt we actually had. I thought it was maybe $10,000 or $15,000. It was way more than that. The HELOC was for almost $50,000. Even after the HELOC, our credit card debt was still huge. I couldn't understand how that was possible. We'd just paid off what I thought was all our debt. Where was this new debt coming from? I started getting really stressed and depressed. I wondered if it was somehow my fault. Maybe I was spending more than I realized. Maybe I wasn't contributing enough financially. Maybe I needed to work more hours, get a second job. I was spiraling and I didn't understand why our finances were such a disaster when we weren't living beyond our means. I started making large payments on our credit cards from my paychecks, trying desperately to get us out of this hole. Then David would cancel the payments, saying he wanted to keep the cash in our checking account just in case we needed it for emergencies. I thought that was odd, but again, I deferred to him. He handled most of our day-to-day finances. I assumed he knew better than I did what we needed. I started looking for a new job with higher pay. I figured if I could just make more money, we could fix this problem. I didn't realize the problem wasn't our income. The problem was that David was hemorrhaging money through his trading addiction. Right before our third baby was born, David started confessing to losses. He'd come to me upset, sometimes crying, and tell me he'd made a bad trade and lost money. Big money, $2,000 here, $4,000 there. He'd say he was so sorry, he knew he had a problem, he was going to stop. I was horrified, but I still didn't understand the full scope. I thought these were isolated incidents, bad decisions, but fixable. I didn't realize he'd been doing this constantly for years, that the losses told not thousands, but tens of thousands of dollars. Our marriage went through the darkest period it had ever experienced over the next 6 to 8 months. I'd just had a baby. I was sleep-deprived, hormonal, overwhelmed with 3 small children. And David was lying to me constantly. He'd promised to stop trading and then do it again. He'd show me his Robinhood account closed and then reopen it a week later. He'd swear he was being honest and then I'd find out about another loss he'd hidden from me. The gaslighting was almost worse than the financial betrayal. When I'd confront him about suspicious charges or behavior, he'd tell me I was overreacting, that I was being paranoid, that I was making a big deal out of nothing. He'd twist things around until I questioned my own perception of reality. Then he'd break down crying and apologize and promise to change. These apologies felt so sincere in the moment. He'd look me in the eyes with tears running down his face and swear he'd never do it again. And I'd believe him, because I wanted to believe him, because he's my husband and the father of my children, and I loved him. But the words were empty. I'd heard them so many times before, and every single time he'd do it again. I kept asking him to show me the closed Robinhood account.
to reset our bank password so I could access it myself. He'd always say he'd get to it, he'd do it tomorrow, he just needed to handle a few things first. But then he never did. I felt like I was going crazy, like I was living in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. Last weekend, I got a notification from our bank that our account was overdrawn. That had never happened before. Never. We'd never had an overdraft in our entire marriage. I was immediately alarmed and asked David what was going on. He insisted it was just because he hadn't had photography work in a while, but he was waiting on payments from several jobs he'd already completed. Several $1,000s that should hit the account any day. I wanted to believe him so badly. I chose to believe him. The next day, he got paid for a job and told me we had $1,000 in our account now.
It was just a temporary cash flow problem. Everything was fine. Yesterday, I got another overdraft notification, but this time, the email showed pending transactions, and 2 of them were to Robinhood. My hands started shaking. My vision went blurry. I felt like I couldn't breathe. After everything, after all the promises, he was still doing it. He was still actively trading and losing our money while our bank account was overdrawn and we had 3 small children to feed. I immediately called David and demanded to see our bank account. He resisted at first. He said if I saw the account, I'd divorce him. That scared me even more. What could possibly be so bad that he thought I'd leave him over it? I told him I needed to see it right now, or I actually would divorce him. He finally gave me his phone. What I saw made me physically ill. Transaction after transaction. Withdrawals to Robinhood for $100, $200, $300, $400. Over and over and over again. Going back weeks and months. I scrolled and scrolled, and there were just endless withdrawals. Occasionally, there'd be a deposit from Robinhood, maybe $1,000, but those were rare. Mostly, it was just money going out, being sucked into this black hole of day trading losses. I felt sick, actually nauseous. I have 3 small children. I work 40+ hours a week at a job I hate, sitting in an office, being away from my babies. And for what? So my husband can gamble it all away? Every dollar I earn, every hour I spend away from my kids, it doesn't matter. He's just destroying it all. I started crying, not gentle tears, but ugly sobbing. My baby, my 3-month-old infant who I'm still breastfeeding, was crying too because she could sense my distress. My other kids were scared and asking what was wrong. And David just sat there, looking ashamed, but also somehow defensive, like he wanted to explain why this wasn't as bad as it looked. But it was bad. It was so much worse than I'd imagined. Taking action. I told David I needed to get a CPA or a lawyer to go through everything since 2020 and figure out exactly what happened and how much he'd lost. He said Robinhood wouldn't give me that information directly, that I'd need to go through him. I said fine, then he needed to pull every single statement and transaction and hand it all over to me immediately. I told him I didn't want a divorce. I really didn't. Despite everything, he's an amazing father. He's patient and loving and playful with our kids. They adore him. I don't want to break up our family. I don't want my children to grow up in separate households, shuffling between parents. But I also told him I couldn't keep living like this. I was so incredibly done with the lies and the broken promises and the financial devastation. I was terrified for our future. How can I stay married to someone who has zero control over an addiction that's destroying our lives? We made a list of actions that needed to happen immediately. First, I needed to see his Robinhood account actually deactivated, confirmed closed, with no ability to reopen it. He called Robinhood right then, and they said they'd deactivate the account in 2 days once his current funds settled. I didn't love the 2-day window, but at least it was something concrete. Second, I needed to transfer our bank account to my name only, so he had no access to any liquid funds. He couldn't be trusted with access to cash.
Every automatic payment that came out of that account would need to be updated and managed by me. Third, all payments for his photography work needed to come through Venmo directly to my account. He wouldn't touch any of the money. I'd give him what he needed for legitimate business expenses, and that was it. Fourth, he needed to start therapy immediately. Not in a few weeks or when he got around to it. Immediately. He needed professional help for his addiction, and he needed to commit to doing the work. I told him all of this while barely holding myself together. I was angry and sad and scared and so incredibly tired. I'm breastfeeding an infant, taking care of 2 other small children, working full-time, and now dealing with this catastrophic financial crisis. I couldn't do it anymore. I just couldn't. David agreed to everything. He was crying and apologizing and promising to do better. I'd heard it all before, but what choice did I have? I had to try one more time. For our kids, if nothing else. The next few weeks were brutal. I was operating on pure survival mode. Get up, feed the baby, get the older kids ready for school, go to work, come home, make dinner, do bedtime routine, stay up late dealing with financial paperwork, sleep for a few hours, repeat. I got access to our bank account and started going through statements. It was worse than I thought, so much worse. The amount David had lost through his trading was staggering. I'm talking well into 6 figures over 4 years. Money that should have gone to our kids' college funds, to our retirement, to paying off our house. Just gone. Gambled away on risky stock options and day trades. I made an appointment with a financial advisor to help us figure out how to recover from this. She was kind but blunt. We were in serious financial trouble. With our current debt and income, we were looking at years of strict budgeting and sacrifice to get back to zero. Forget saving for retirement or college. We'd be lucky to keep our house. I also made David get a full credit report so I could see if there were any other debts or accounts I didn't know about. Thankfully, there weren't. The damage was contained to what I'd already discovered. Small mercies, I guess. David did follow through on closing his Robinhood account. I watched him do it, got the confirmation email, checked multiple times to make sure it was actually closed. He also started therapy with a counselor who specialized in gambling addiction. He went to his first appointment the week after our confrontation and has been going weekly since then. I wanted to feel relieved, but I couldn't. I was too angry and hurt and betrayed. Every time I looked at David, I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't untangle. Love, hatred, pity, contempt, hope, despair. It was exhausting. Our relationship was cold during this time. We barely talked beyond logistics about the kids and household management. We didn't laugh together or have real conversations or show each other affection. We were just 2 people existing in the same house, co-parenting, going through the motions. I thought a lot about divorce during those weeks. I'd lie awake at night after feeding the baby and imagine what my life would look like as a single mother of 3. It seemed overwhelming, but also maybe simpler. At least I wouldn't be dealing with David's addiction and lies. At least I could trust that the money I earned would actually go toward my kids' needs. But then I'd watch him with our children and my heart would hurt. He really is a wonderful father. Our kids love him so much. Our oldest daughter adores him, follows him around, wants to help with his photography equipment. Our middle child saves up jokes all day to tell Daddy at bedtime. Our baby lights up when she sees him. How could I take that away from them? How could I blow up their world because their father has an addiction? I felt trapped. Staying seemed impossible, but leaving seemed cruel to my kids. There was no good choice. At my therapist's suggestion, I started attending Al-Anon meetings. Al-Anon is a support group for families of people with addiction. It's mostly known for alcoholism, but they support families dealing with any kind of addiction. Walking into my first meeting was hard. I felt like a failure, like I should have been able to handle this on my own, like I shouldn't need to sit in a church basement with other people's problems. But the moment people started sharing their stories, I felt less alone. These people understood. They'd been through the lies, the broken promises, the financial destruction, the emotional manipulation. They knew what it was like to love someone who was destroying themselves and hurting everyone around them. One woman, probably in her 60s, shared about her husband's gambling addiction that had lasted 40 years. 40 years! She'd stayed, and he'd eventually gotten clean, and they'd rebuilt their life together. But she said the hardest part wasn't the money. It was learning to trust again, learning to believe his promises, learning to forgive while still protecting herself. Another woman shared about leaving her husband after 20 years because she couldn't watch him destroy herself anymore. She had kids too, teenagers, and she said leaving was the hardest thing she'd ever done, but staying was killing her. Her kids were okay. They adjusted. They still had a relationship with their father. Life went on. Hearing both perspectives helped. There wasn't one right answer. Every situation was different, and I had to figure out what was right for me and my family. One thing everyone emphasized was the concept of detachment. Not detachment like not caring, but detachment like not trying to control things you can't control. I couldn't control whether David gambled or not. I could only control my own actions and responses. I could set boundaries, protect our finances, take care of myself and our kids. But I couldn't force him to recovery. That had to be his choice. This was hard for me to accept. I'm a fix-it person. I solve problems, I make plans and execute them. But I couldn't fix David's addiction.
All my efforts to control it, to monitor him, to prevent him from gambling were pointless if he wasn't doing the work himself. David continued going to therapy. He joined a Gamblers Anonymous group and started attending meetings twice a week. He was very compliant with all my financial restrictions. He showed me his phone whenever I asked, let me check any accounts, gave me access to everything. I was still hypervigilant, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'd read that relapse rates for gambling addiction were around 90%. 90%! Those odds were terrifying. It seemed almost inevitable that he'd slip up again. But months passed and he didn't, at least not that I knew about. There was always that fear in the back of my mind. Maybe he was getting better at hiding it. Maybe he'd opened new accounts I didn't know about. Maybe he was borrowing money from friends or family. I couldn't prove anything, but I couldn't fully trust either. The financial situation slowly improved. David took on more photography work, including some he wasn't excited about, but that paid well. I got a raise at my job. We made a strict budget and actually stuck to it. We were still drowning in debt, but at least we weren't taking on new debt. We were treading water instead of actively sinking. But our marriage was still struggling. The intimacy was gone. We were like roommates who co-parented. We didn't talk about anything real. We didn't laugh together. We definitely weren't having sex. I couldn't bring myself to be vulnerable with him when trust was still so broken. David tried to reconnect with me. He'd suggest date nights or ask if we could talk. I'd make excuses. I wasn't ready. I was still too hurt and angry. Part of me wanted to punish him by withholding affection and closeness. It wasn't healthy, but it was how I felt. My therapist told me I was stuck in resentment, that I needed to either commit to forgiving him and rebuilding our marriage or leave. Living in this limbo of neither forgiving nor leaving was just hurting both of us. She was right, but I didn't know how to move forward. How do you forgive something this big? How do you trust someone who has broken your trust so completely and so many times? Around month 6, we had a breakthrough. Or maybe it was a breaking point. I'm still not sure. We were putting the kids to bed and our oldest daughter asked why Mommy and Daddy didn't hug anymore like other kids' parents. Why we seemed sad all the time. Why the house felt different now. Kids pick up on everything. We thought we were hiding our marital problems, but our 7-year-old saw right through us. After we got her settled and left her room, David and I just looked at each other in the hallway, and I started crying. I told him I didn't know how to be married to him anymore, that I didn't know who he was.
That the man I married wouldn't have lied to me for years and destroyed our financial security. That I felt like I was living with a stranger. David broke down too. He said he knew he changed, that the addiction had changed him, that he'd lost himself in it. He said he understood if I couldn't forgive him, that he'd failed me and our kids. But he was trying so hard to be better. He was doing everything I'd asked. What more could he do? I told him I didn't know, that maybe there was nothing he could do, that maybe the damage was just too deep. We stood in that hallway crying for a long time. Then David said something that surprised me. He said if I wanted a divorce, he'd understand. He wouldn't fight it. He'd agree to whatever custody arrangement I wanted, do whatever I needed him to do. He loved me and our kids more than anything, and if the best thing for us was for him to let go, he would. That honesty, that willingness to accept consequences broke something open in me. For the first time in months, I saw David as a person and not just his addiction. I saw him as my husband who was suffering, who was fighting his own demons, who was trying despite everything. I told him I didn't want a divorce. I wanted my husband back. I wanted our marriage back. But I didn't know how to get there. He said he didn't either, but maybe we could figure it out together if I was willing to try. So we decided to try, really try, not just go through the motions. We made an appointment with a marriage counselor. We committed to weekly date nights, even if they were just sitting on the porch after the kids went to bed. We started talking again, really talking, about our feelings and fears and hopes. It was hard. There were setbacks and arguments and moments where I wanted to give up. But slowly, incrementally, things got better. It's been a little over a year now since I discovered the full extent of David's trading losses. A year since that awful night when I saw our bank account and felt my world collapse. David hasn't gambled or traded since he closed his Robinhood account. He's still in therapy, still attending GA meetings, still being completely transparent with finances. He got a part-time job at a camera store to supplement his freelance income, giving us more financial stability and also keeping him busy during the day so he's less tempted to trade. Our finances are still a mess, but they're improving. We've paid off about 30% of our debt. We have a realistic 5-year plan to be debt-free. It's a long road, but at least we're moving in the right direction. Our marriage has recovered more than I thought possible. We're not back to where we were before all this happened. We're different now. There's scar tissue that will probably always be there. I don't think I'll ever trust him as completely and naively as I once did. But we've built something new, something more honest and resilient. We talk about hard things now instead of avoiding them. We check in with each other emotionally. We're conscious about our relationship in a way we weren't before. David is different too. The addiction recovery process changed him. He's more self-aware, more humble, more present. He says hitting rock bottom was the worst thing that ever happened to him, but also maybe necessary. That he needed to lose everything to realize what actually mattered.
I still have hard days, days when I remember how he lied to me and I feel that spike of anger and betrayal. Days when I check our bank account obsessively because I'm terrified it's happening again. Days when I wonder if I'm being naive to trust him, if I'm setting myself up for another devastation down the road. But those days are getting less frequent. Most days now, I'm just grateful. Grateful we're still together, grateful David is in recovery, grateful our kids have both their parents under one roof. I've learned a lot through this experience, about addiction and codependency and enabling, about the difference between support and control, about forgiveness and trust and how they're not the same thing, about my own strength and resilience. I've also learned that life is messy and complicated, and there aren't always clear answers. Staying in my marriage was a choice, leaving would have been a choice, and neither would have been wrong. I made the best decision I could with the information I had and the situation I was in. The future still feels uncertain sometimes. Gambling addiction has a high relapse rate, and I'm aware that David could slip at any time. We've talked about what would happen if he did. We have a relapse plan now.
clear boundaries and consequences. I know what I would do if it happened again, and David knows too. But I'm also learning to live in the present instead of catastrophizing about the future. Today, right now, we're okay. David is in recovery, our kids are happy and healthy, our marriage is healing. That's enough. We're planning to renew our vows on our 15th anniversary, 4 years from now. It was David's idea. He wants to make new promises now that he's in a place to actually keep them. Promises made with full honesty and awareness. I like that idea. A fresh start, a recommitment to each other with clear eyes and open hearts. I still go to Al-Anon meetings regularly. They keep me grounded and remind me I'm not alone in this. Other families are fighting similar battles. Some win, some lose, most are somewhere in between. That's life. My kids don't know the full story of what happened, and they won't for years. But they know Daddy had a problem and got help, and that Mommy and Daddy love each other and are working things out. That's enough for now. I'm working on my own healing too. Therapy, self-care, trying to rebuild my sense of security and trust. It's slow work, but important work. If you're reading this and you're in a similar situation, here's what I want you to know. You're not alone. Gambling addiction and financial abuse are more common than people talk about. There are resources and support groups and people who understand. You're not responsible for your partner's addiction. You didn't cause it, you can't control it, and you can't cure it. The only person who can address their addiction is the addict themselves. Whatever you decide to do, stay or leave, is valid. Don't let anyone shame you either way. This is your life and your choice. Protect yourself financially. Get your name on accounts, monitor credit reports, set up safeguards. This isn't about being controlling. It's about being responsible when your partner isn't capable of being responsible themselves. Take care of yourself. This situation will drain you emotionally and physically if you let it. You can't help anyone else if you're not okay yourself. Therapy, support groups, friends, whatever you need, use it. Have hope, but also realistic expectations. Recovery is possible, but it's hard work and takes time. Relapse is common. Healing from betrayal is a long process. Be patient with yourself and your partner if they're genuinely trying. Looking back now, I see how many red flags I missed or ignored. The gambling problem he told me about at the beginning of our relationship should have been a bigger warning sign. The password change on our bank account should have been addressed immediately. The vague explanations about money should have prompted more investigation. But I loved him and trusted him and wanted to believe the best. That's not a character flaw. That's being human. I can't change the past, but I can learn from it. If I could tell my past self anything, I'd say trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't ignore red flags out of love or loyalty or fear. Protect yourself and your children first, always. But I'd also tell myself that it's possible to survive something like this, that you can rebuild after betrayal, that addiction doesn't have to be a death sentence for a marriage if both people are willing to do the hard work. A year ago, I thought my marriage was over. I thought there was no coming back from what David had done. I was wrong. We did come back. We're still coming back every single day. It's not perfect and it's not easy, but it's real and it's ours. That's all any of us can really hope for in the end. Something real, even if it's messy. Something honest, even if it's hard. Something worth fighting for, even when the fight seems impossible. My marriage survived, my family survived, I survived. And if you're going through something similar, I believe you can survive too. Whatever happens next, we'll handle it together, one day at a time. That's all anyone can do, really. Just keep showing up, keep trying, keep hoping that tomorrow might be a little better than today. Most days now, it is. Did this story get to you? Leave a like and subscribe. More true stories are coming soon.